It's the lens, it's the lens, it's the lens, gotta live diverse. It's the lens, it's the lens, it's the lens, live diverse. You are listening to The Lens Living Diverse, a podcast brought to you by the CNIB advocacy team. Join Nisha, Vivi, and I as we speak to individuals with intersecting identities who live with sight loss as they share their unique stories. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Lens Living Diverse. I am your host for today. I'm going to be doing it solo, and we have an amazing episode today. So, when you look at diversity and then when you throw in disability, more specifically sight loss, something that's so important is mentorship and representation. So I know on episodes in the past, we spoke about the importance of representation and mentorship, especially when you're looking at intersecting identities such as race and disability and even culture. So today, a really fun episode. I have my guest, Nav Dhillon from the 1iCollective, and we're going to be chatting about mentorship, representation, and everything in between about her intersecting identities. So, Nav, welcome to the Lens Living Diverse. How are you doing today?
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Bernard, for giving me the opportunity and taking charge of such an important discussion as it relates to people with vision loss. I'm really excited to just get started.
Of course, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, and I love doing this podcast. I love doing the lens. So I am going to start off by letting you introduce yourselves to the listeners. So if you could tell a little bit about yourself.
Of course, yes. So as Bernard mentioned, my name is Nav Dhillon. I'm the founder of a not-for-profit called 1iCollective. I started this not-for-profit as I started my advocating journey and wanting to help other people in the community of vision loss across the country, specifically from the perspective of people that are in more vulnerable communities or visible communities, as some of the barriers can be quite different. And I share that because I am someone that identifies as a woman of South Asian background. My parents came from India when they were 17 years old. And, you know, I've had a unique experience having vision loss. And about my vision loss, I have a vision impairment, so I'm blind in my left eye, although I have good functional vision in my right eye. So I think that experience, coupled with the fact that I come from a community where there are some barriers that exist, at least when it comes to representation, mental health, and maybe the biggest thing was the psychological safety that wasn't really there to talk about what I was going through. All of these things motivated me to start my own initiative where I can, cater to the needs of people whose needs might not be met by what's available to the masses. So that's kind of the purpose behind 1iCollective. Prior to that, I was working in the corporate world. I have an MBA from the University of Toronto, and those are great experiences. But over the years and during COVID, I just felt a shift, and I really wanted to help this community because I know there are probably other people out there who have experienced what I have. So that's kind of how I got to this point.
Wonderful, wonderful. And it's is very unique when you do bring in culture and disability, because even for myself, being having the Ghanaian culture and then living with sight loss, it's so different. And we all have different stories, and we all have different circumstances, which other individuals could really relate to. So it is amazing that you're coming up with the 1iCollective, and you're sharing your story. And speaking of sharing your story, you did mention you have a unique story to your sight loss. So if you're okay with sharing your story of living with sight loss.
Yeah, I'm very happy to share my story with sight loss. So I was born with 20/20 vision and didn't really experience any issues growing up until I was 20 years old, where I was involved in an accident. I just happened to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was outside of a nightclub when I was 20 years old, and a beer bottle was thrown in my direction. I didn't see it coming, and I kind of just heard something behind me. And as I turned around, I was hit, and then I was on the ground. And the next thing I remember is
Mm,
waking up in the hospital and seeing my parents,
mm,
and they were emotional and hysterical. I just couldn't really feel anything on my face. And it was later on that day that I found out that I was hit with something in the face, and we weren't even sure what it was. The hospital staff weren't sure as well. So we did an ultrasound and scans just to see if there was any foreign body in the eye, and it turns out there wasn't. But the damage was already done. I had a very large laceration on my left eye, which required sutures that night. And it was that after that night, I never really saw again out of that eye. And years later, after many surgeries to my retina and my cornea, my eye pressure had dropped so low and I was living in chronic pain.
mm,
So eventually I met an ophthalmologist who suggested suggested that I consider the possibility of having my eye eviscerated, which is the procedure that removes most of the contents of the eye, not the complete eye, but the most of the contents of the eye. The other form of that surgery is called an inoculation. And I think
mm.
it's important for people to know the difference. So with an inoculation, that is when the complete eye is removed from the orbit. And that's usually done in more extreme cases where there's a lot of damage. In my case, the damage was to the vision, to the retina, and so the contents of the eye were removed, whereas the sclera or the shape of the eye was still left, so the muscles were attached. And the reason why my ophthalmologist did that is because he knew once I start wearing an artificial eye, that I'll still have some movement and functionality in my eye socket. So I'm
Mm.
really grateful for that. And yeah, so now I wear an artificial eye in my left eye, and I advocate for artificial eyes. And
Yeah, and it's interesting because you stepped into a new community compared to individuals who were born with sight loss, even for myself, where and this is what I say about I guess because everybody's so unique with their stories where you have here's yourself where it was acquired sight loss and later on in the years and 20 years old. Uh, then you have myself who was born with it, but didn't really realize that I had sight loss because I was playing football and basketball and felt like I was just like everybody else until I got older and it progressively got worse. So it's so interesting stepping into that new world per se. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, and that's why I guess the story is unique in a sense that sometimes you don't realize you have this privilege until it's taken away from you. And that in itself can be a very isolating experience. And it certainly was for me. I was in my second year of university. Life was just starting. I was always a huge introvert growing up, and I
Mm,
feel that I was just becoming this social butterfly. And then this injury happened, and it really impacted the quality of life. And so, whereas someone that may have been born with the condition, they kind of already knew and they start building that resilience. My resilience came much later. And I think it's in retrospect, looking back, I think the way I dealt with it was I internalized it. I didn't want it to affect me. And I was also raised in a community and a family where we didn't really talk about things that were bothering us. We kind of just we went right into action.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took that mindset, and that's what I applied to my circumstances. And in a way, it was good. It built some resilience, but I wasn't really dealing with the emotional and psychological impacts of now having this new reality where I couldn't see out of one eye, and that affects how I move about, my field of vision. So I have to be a little bit more mindful of when I'm maneuvering through tight spaces and whatnot. So there's definitely a large adjustment. And I think it can be quite isolating when you've lived your entire life one way, but then one day it completely changes.
Exactly. And then even adding on to that, the relationships with friends and family, those definitely change as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. So uh, this actually goes into my next question, and something that I bet the listeners wonder, especially those who have similar identities to you. Uh, the identities of being a South Asian woman, do you think those identities are represented through organizations?
In a short answer, I don't think so. Not enough, anyways. When I was going through what I did, um, about a little over a decade ago, um, I was so desperately seeking for someone to share their story that looked like me. So I didn't feel like I was the only one. Because again, like I mentioned, I grew up in a community and in a household where we didn't really talk about things that were bothering us. We kind of just moved on. But that doesn't change the fact that I was still struggling, to make sense of everything, to try to be happy, try to, emulate what people were saying, that you're so strong, you're so great, look at you. It's like I was trying to convince myself of these things. And as much as I was, it was very isolating because I felt different on the inside. So,
Mm,
that was around the time when social media just started to get really big. So I was always online trying to find people who had also lost their eye that I could relate to. And, there are a few people out there that we can think of, but I did eventually find some women, but they were Caucasian. They didn't look like me.
mhm,
And although it was nice to see that there were other women out there that had gone through this and they were open about their stories. It didn't change the fact that there weren't South Asian women talking about this. In fact, I would say that experience was exasperated because whenever I did come across another South Asian woman who experienced some kind of vision loss, it was very there was a lot of shame around it. Maybe their
mm,
family didn't know, their partner didn't know, very few people knew, they didn't want anyone to know about it. So it just reinstated that belief that this is something that you don't talk about, that this is something that there's a lot of shame around.
mm,
And even, in my own extended family, mind you, I completely understand that a lot of these, folks, they had never experienced this. And everyone means well. You can't assume that people don't mean well. People do mean well, but it's how things come across that can really impact you. And people would say things about me like, oh, what's wrong with her eye? Are you the girl with the eye?
mm,
And so it kind of just added to that stigma. And what I internalized was, okay, like I'm not supposed to talk about this. And even now, when I do try to talk about it, amongst other, South Asians, it's mixed responses. Some people will say, "Oh, it's good that you're talking about it." It's that
mm,
new mindset of this is healthy. We should talk about that versus, the old set of values where it's we don't really acknowledge mental health, and we don't really talk about disability. And I do appreciate that, for my parents, for example, they were immigrants to this country, so
yes.
they were in survival mode. Their whole purpose was to establish themselves, their family, get their kids educated. they themselves never had the opportunity to really address, their mental health and their, prioritize self-care. So I think it's one of those things that anyone that is of, an ethnic background or has parents that immigrated to a new country, you're dealing with a new set of values, and that can be really challenging. So I think that definitely added to the complexity.
Yeah.
So to go back to, your question, I personally didn't think there was enough representation, and that added to the isolation of this experience.
Yeah, and even what you were just saying about being open with your journey of sight loss and your prosthetic eye, it really reminds me of a friend of mine who is South Asian as well. And she wrote an article for Fighting Blindness Canada. And it was her first time actually almost coming out the closet of being a person with sight loss, where she was actually writing, I have sight loss. This is my experience. I had to hide it all these years. And I remember talking to her, and she was making mention that when she was writing the article, she was shaking. Like when she submitted it, she was shaking because similar to the South Asian culture, the African culture is almost where looking at sight loss, it's a hindrance. It's I don't want to bring this word back up, but a handicap to your life. But once you, and I remember after she submitted the article and people read it and she got feedback, people were like, wow, like this is amazing. And having that perspective where you put it out there, but you put it in a positive sense, people are start to waver with that fear. And is this something that you felt as well when you were kind of letting people know and being free with your sight loss?
Yeah, of course. I remember exactly how I first shared my story and what that feeling was like. I used to work for one of the large banks, and we had this internal website. And I remember reading a story about one of our executives. She was a Caucasian woman, but she was very vulnerable in this article. And she talked about she decided to share her story of struggling with mental health because she wanted to play her part in reducing stigma. And I remember reading that story and just thinking, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to do this because
Mhm.
this is an organization where there are so many South Asians, and I want to see more representation, and maybe my story will lead that charge. And so it was a bit of a personal goal for me to do that. And within 2 months, I emailed the communications team, and they were really interested. They interviewed me, and my story was released. And I can tell you, Bernard, I was so
Yes.
nervous that I had actually booked a week off and traveled to Vancouver to see my family because I was so afraid and nervous about
Mm,
how this was going to be perceived. I had never done this before. And
mm,
to my surprise, it was met with such a positive response and feedback. I had executives from across the organization of all different backgrounds reaching out to me. I had so many South Asians and people of color within my organization thanking
mm,
me for, sharing my story. And then they started to open up to me about things that they have been struggling with, regardless of what it was. It could have been something related to mental health, anxiety, a physical difference, or a limitation of some sort that they have experienced. And that is when I really started to see the power in sharing my story. I saw that it immediately created this openness for other people to feel safe to share their stories. And I think after that day, I just never turned back. I said, I'm going to keep doing this. And if that means I have to do a little bit more outreach to reach certain communities, I'll do that. And It's interesting that you mentioned thank you for sharing the story about your friend, and her taking the opportunity to share her story.
Yeah.
What I want to do with 1iCollective and what we have been doing is we've been giving our platform for people of the community to share their stories. And a lot of them, it's the first time. Some of them have never done it before, and it's incredibly empowering because when they share their story, they get a lot of positive responses. They meet with new people, and it's just getting over that limiting belief that their story is not important and that they should have shame around it. So that is something that 1iCollective takes a lot of pride in. We have a monthly newsletter that we distribute digitally, and every month we feature a story called iHero, and it's open
Mm.
to anyone that would like to share their story. And they are an iHero because going through an experience like this is not easy, and it builds some incredible skills. And I think as a society, regardless of what your background is, we need to reframe how we see disability and vision loss and vision impairments. It's not a hindrance. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's your reality is just a little different. That doesn't make it any less important or anything that you should have to hide. In fact, let's use our stories to educate people and build awareness about the unique skills and perspectives that we build as a result of the things that we go through.
Well said, Nav. Oh, I agree with you 200% with what you're making mention on. It's about liberation. It's about flipping the script and looking at disability, more specifically sight loss, as a positive and as a resiliency. And that goes into my next question, where we were actually having a discussion prior to this podcast, and you made mention of different ways to show beauty to sight loss in terms of like modeling and in terms of representation in mainstream. So uh, even if you could share a little bit more about mentorship and representation in terms of those different outlets.
Yeah, I'd love to. This is a great topic. So, along with storytelling and being liberated by sharing your story, I wanted to take it one step further and really, really see how we can further, represent people of South Asian backgrounds in just even in the general media. I mean, social media is great, but sometimes the reach isn't always there. And so I started researching inclusive modeling agencies, and I came across one based in the UK. They're called Zebedee Talent, and they have been doing some incredible work. They have quite a big roster. I have a couple of friends that are signed with them, and that's how I really started to see, the impact they're making. They are now in Australia. I think they're in Japan, and they just recently opened up some offices in the United States. And this space of inclusive modeling is really, really growing. So I think there's a great opportunity to get involved if that's something that you feel comfortable doing. And when I came across this agency, I reached out to them. So I've signed with them. But this was all before I found out about another agency in Canada called Kello. And they are, I don't even know if they're a year since launch, but I had the privilege of meeting the founders last week. And, they are doing some incredible work. The founders' names are Katie and Austin, I believe. And you can look them up, or we'll have their links in the show notes.
Mhm.
And they essentially created an inclusive agency because there wasn't one in Canada. And we're such a big country. We have so many people. We have such a diverse population. And our stories need to be told. And they have a daughter that has a disability, and they realized through her experience that this area was just incredibly untapped. So they wanted to get into it. They wanted to help other people share their stories and bridge the gap between art and people or persons with disabilities. And so we connected, and we're going to be working together in the new year, and I'm really excited about that. And so I guess with that, what I'd say is, if you are passionate about being an advocate and sharing your story, and you believe in representation, especially if you're a person of color, or you have intersectional identities, this would be a great opportunity. And I hope that this inspires more organizations to have a more diverse lens, even in their marketing, how they design products, and just how they connect with their audiences, because we're not all just one type. We all have unique needs. We have unique experiences, and brands should really capitalize on the fact that there are agencies out there that are willing to work with them to better represent all of those different voices.
I love it. I love it. And I may have to quit my day job and check into that modeling agency. The only thing I'd be afraid of fall off the stage if it's ever a fashion show for sure. But nah, that's such a great resource because once again, what it does, it flips the script, right? It shows the beauty of disability and the fact that everybody's represented. You see individuals with disabilities, different races, different cultures, different religions, and I find that just very beautiful. And that's why, like I said in this episode, I love doing the Lens Living Diverse, and I love guests like yourself to give these gems because I didn't know about that modeling agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely thank you. And then also, is there other mentorship representation that you came across that you're delivering? And I know you made mention of the 1iCollective. If you would like to go into any more details about the organization.
Yeah, just to kind of expand on the whole mentorship thing. As I mentioned, when I was in my organization, it was the first time where I had access to stories and individuals who were empowered to share their story, and that really inspired me. And it took a really long time for me to find people like that. And so I'm really grateful, for my um, employers and the opportunities that I've had through my career and attending various events where I get exposure to these kinds of individuals. And mentorship does exist. And for anyone that has a disability or sight loss, I know it can be harder to find these resources, but I encourage you to be curious, listen to podcasts, to read books, um, pay attention to the news. There are people out there that are doing wonderful things. Don't give up. And if you feel that no one relates to you, I assure you that there is probably someone out there that feels the same way as you. So, yeah, keep your hopes up. Don't give up. That I certainly didn't. And I think it was my hope that kind of, when the opportunity finally came, I just went for it. But it was always within me. And I'm sure if you feel something about this and you feel like you want to make a difference, that's pretty special. Don't let go of that. And it may make you angry, it may make you sad, and it may make you really excited and a whole bag of other emotions, but that just means you're really passionate. And when you're passionate, law of attract, I believe in law of attraction, and
Mm-hmm.
the signs of the universe and manifestation, it will come to you. And this world is only becoming more interconnected, so it's going to be a matter of time. Outside of the modeling agencies and through my career, I would say the other places that I found mentorship were definitely through organizations like the CNIB. That's how I met
Mm-hmm.
you. There are always going to be organizations, big or small, that are advocating for the causes that we're passionate about. And sometimes they're hard to find. And with the CNIB, they weren't hard to find, but I have built, yeah, this is a relationship I've been building for years. And over time, I have finally connected with people that I really, we share similar passions, like Bernard, you and I. So I think there's a lot out there that we can take advantage of in our own empowerment stories. So now, given all of that, like, where is 1iCollective trying to bridge the gap? So as I mentioned, we did launch a digital newsletter where we're using our platform to not only share the stories of people who are eye heroes, this is anyone that has gone through some sort of adversity with their vision or their eyes. You are an eye hero, and we want to share your story. And if this is something that you're interested in, you can check out the show notes for links on how to get in touch with us. In addition to that, we also like to feature every month an organization or a cause that is committed to empowering or supporting people with vision impairments. So that can be perhaps an eye doctor who is running free accessible clinics on the weekend, or it could be an organization that is making custom conformers or artificial eyes that are unique to the person's design preference, which is a cool thing that's really happening. So it's just an opportunity to kind of introduce someone or a unique service that's available to people in the vision loss community. In addition to the newsletter, another thing that I've actually been working on with the CNIB is potentially coming up with a workshop or support group that will launch sometime in the new year. This will be open to everyone, but we really want to take a focus on the less represented communities, such as the South Asian community, and create a support group, a peer support group, where they can feel safe and learn about the different tools and resources that are available to them, whether it's through CNIB, through vision loss rehab, or other government-funded programs and resources that are available that people might not be taking advantage of. And in addition to the resources, we want to make it fun and collaborative. So we might do a workshop on teaching people how to play an instrument that have vision loss. And these workshops will be available in both in person and online as well. So we will be releasing more information about these workshops sometime after the new year. And lastly, the other thing that we're really passionate about is obviously reducing stigma in any way that we can. So I am a huge creative at heart, even though I spent a lot of years in the corporate world. I love videography, photography. So we're always looking for ways to run campaigns and reduce disability stigma. And I really hope in the future, Bernard, we can work on something together to, launch some kind of campaign where people can see an ad or read an article and see someone that looks like them, and get people more engaged and embracing their new realities.
Yes, I totally agree, and we will definitely speak offline about so many ideas, because even as you're speaking, I had just a flutter of different ideas, and I'm afraid if I give it away on the podcast, it might be taken away from me. But not that that's a bad
thing. Yeah.
not that's a bad thing, and I just love what you're doing with 1iCollective, because at the same time as expressing awareness, at the same time as taking away that taboo and that stigma, it's that creative nature. And I really look at these programs, and the one thing I think about when I think about mentorship and representation, especially when you put all these identities together, I think about young people. and the young people who have to go through sight loss, who have a different culture, who they, and exactly like you were making mention, you see someone who is not the same race as you, but has the same disability, or even vice versa. So it's so important that we bridge all these gaps. And I'm going to go into, and I'm curious, I'm going to go into being a South Asian woman, and then having a disability as well. And was there any like kind of contrast, especially the beliefs of your culture as well, when it comes to those two identities?
As I mentioned probably a little bit earlier, when you asked me about the, my different identities and being a part of a family unit where you have these old views and traditions and values clashing with the new views. And I think the conversation of disability is a great example of that contrast of values. Um, as I mentioned, in what I saw growing up was people that definitely went through hardships. I can think of a few people in my family that have had some kind of disability or physical impairment, but it was never spoken about.
Mhm.
It was just like, oh, that's the uncle with the leg.
Mm,
That's the uncle with the funny eye. You know what I mean? It was like there were labels, but there was very
mm,
little understanding, and there was a lot of sympathy. I find that the immediate response is, I feel really sorry for you. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, that
mm,
girl, your daughter. Oh my God, we feel so sorry for her. And, I think what we have to realize is the negative impact of that. That doesn't set someone up for success. That sets someone up to feel like they should feel sorry for themselves, that they're a victim.
mm,
Instead, we should, number one, allow people to talk about what they want to talk about. And if they want to be open about their disability, it shouldn't be anyone's decision and they shouldn't be judged for that. And I
mm,
think that's a big clash because myself, I'm the first one in my family, or maybe second. I do have another family member who in her own right, she's been quite vocal about her experiences, but it is a little isolating when you're the only one in the family that really sees challenges with the old paradigm and you want to make a difference, but there's still a lot of people that don't want to leave that paradigm. And you
mm,
have to just accept it that everyone is on their own path. I'm happy to say that in my experience, I think my family, they definitely understand that this is something that I'm really passionate about and they're supportive of that. It took a really long time for them to come around,
mhm,
but eventually we got there. And for anyone that is at that intersection of, whether you're a woman of color or you come from a ethnic background and you haven't seen people like yourself or no one in your family or community has spoken about these things, just know that you're not alone. There
mm,
are people out there that are experiencing that. For example, I'm South Asian, my parents are from India and your family is from Ghana, but we have a lot of similarities in the sense that this isn't something that was really, really widely spoken about, let alone advocated for within our communities. So sometimes you're going to be a bit of a pioneer, and that is a challenge, but I keep going back to adversity builds character. And um, you know, just going back to the experience of being a South Asian woman and having a vision impairment, I do want to talk about something that's a little bit more sensitive, and that is, just the stigma around appearance and
mm,
beauty. And there is a lot of emphasis on a woman's appearance and her abilities. And for some reason, when you have a disability or some, I know women with illnesses, chronic illnesses, you're looked at as a woman that may not be able to, be like the average woman, which is so unfair and so not true.
Mhm.
Just because your abilities might slightly differ or you have to manage your condition doesn't mean that you are less capable of being a mother, for example,
Mhm.
or taking care of yourself or your family. So I think there is a lot of stigma around that. And I've spoken to other women that identify as South Asian with disabilities, and they've kind of echoed the same thing, that there's been this belief that they are somehow less capable.
Mhm.
And I think this is a huge, you know, it's it's just not true. If you look at a lot of people that do have disabilities, they've accomplished great things. And this is why I think campaigning is so important. When you share the stories of people who have gone through physical adversity or mental adversity, but still accomplished great things, whether they,
Mhm.
have a family, run a business, um, doing something in the community. We need to amplify these stories and rephrase or reframe them from being a victim to being someone who's resilient and has a diverse set of skills.
Exactly. And I like the point where you brought up once it's a physical disability or a known disability, it's almost like you're broken. And it's almost where people associate physical, something physical with success and with how you're doing. And such a good point that you brought up, where just because you have a disability, it doesn't mean you're like missing out. It doesn't mean
Right.
you're you're not going to succeed.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know why or when this association was made, um, but it's not true. We need to have a little bit more of an open mind and not be so judgmental, especially when we don't completely understand what the nature of the
Mhm.
disability is. Be open, be curious, and you never know. Disability can impact you, it could impact a family member. And I find that a lot of people, unless they are, they've had an immediate family member or work in close proximity to anyone that's had a disability, there is this judgment, and so you
Mhm.
could say it could be about experience, but it doesn't have to be that way. Um, Inform yourself, and that only helps you because you never know. As a manager, you may have an employee with a disability, or you may have a manager, a colleague, like I said, your child, a friend. You don't know when someone may um, go through something, and it's just good to have a more open mindset and be more inclusive to everyone and their experiences, and instead of leading with judgment, because we may also learn something.
Exactly. And this is why I'm so excited about organizations such as the 1iCollective, such as the CNIB, what you're doing in the community. So excited because uh, it's bringing awareness, it's advocating, and it's definitely making a change and triggering new ways of thinking for sure. So this leads me into the last question. I don't want to ask the last question because I feel like it means that we're going to end our episode after. And it's been such great conversation. So I know it's been scattered throughout the podcast, and you touched upon it a lot already, but I guess to wrap it up in a neat little package, what advice would you provide people who are experiencing similar circumstances to your own?
I'm thinking of two things. So firstly, there's the experience of having a vision impairment, being blind in one eye and wearing an artificial eye. There's certainly that aspect of it, and also identifying as someone of color. But then the other aspect is being of South Asian background and having to deal with all of the adversities that come with that, and living with a vision impairment. Um, So I'm hoping this advice can kind of cover both of those two areas. But firstly, I want to say that I think the most important thing we can do is be there for ourselves. And that's done through building self-worth. I think there are a lot of things in life that can erode self-worth, and being or having a disability can certainly do that because of the things that we discussed. There's a lot of stigma. Sometimes there's the isolation piece. There's going through the physical experience of having a disability and having those limitations. Those things can really add up, and they can really affect your mental health.
Mhm.
And so I think we have to be aware of that, and not deny that, not suppress it. And if you are aware of it, know that there are things we can do to make sure we do manage our mental health as best as we can. And one of that is knowing that there is support available. Um, I used to have this terrible fear of not asking for help, but ever since I started to share my story and built a little bit more comfort around saying how I feel and asking for support, it's come. And that's been a big shift in how I feel about myself. And so for anyone out there who's listening, who has felt the impacts mentally, psychologically, emotionally, do know that there is support out there. Organizations like CNIB and 1iCollective exist. We're here because we want to support this community and let people know they're not alone and that your experience is very, very real. So that would be my first piece of advice. Like, make sure you are getting, your needs met, and don't suppress them, because that only makes things worse. Secondly, I would say don't be afraid to reach out and connect with people. If you, whether it's organizations like CNIB or 1iCollective, or there's an individual out there who you're really fond of, you never know where that connection can go. I have met incredible people around the world who wear artificial eyes or have experienced vision loss. And those connections, those relationships are so incredibly important, because it reminds me that I'm not the only one experiencing these things. So I think there's definitely a power of relationships and connections. And with social media, it's so much easier to connect with people. Having a community is really, really important. And then lastly, I would say, if you feel that if you've experienced injustice and you feel angry or sad about it, that is a sign that you're passionate. You're
Mhm.
passionate about this. So get involved. It can really, really make a big difference in how you see yourself, how you see your disability, or whatever experience you've gone through. It really helps us make sense of things and feel like you didn't just go through this for nothing. You went through it because your experience is going to help other people. And it's a really rewarding feeling. So I'd say I think those three things are pieces of advice that I wish I was given when I first went through my experience and losing my eye. If I really knew these things and felt them, I think I would have gotten to this place a lot sooner.
Great pieces of advice, Nav. Great pieces. I was definitely jotting them down for sure, as the listeners should be jotting them down for sure. And um, advocacy is key, asking for help, just being vulnerable and sharing your stories, some great pieces of advice. And just in general, the great pieces of advice and great resources. And definitely, I will be putting the modeling agency into the show notes, as well as the 1iCollective. But at this moment, Nav, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story and informing the listeners about just so much that's going on.
Honestly, it's been such a pleasure to be here and speak to you about something that I'm so passionate about. Thank you for putting this podcast together and giving people like me a platform. I hope we can do it again or definitely get some other opportunity to work together. And yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Of course, I'll be knocking on your door.
Woohoo!
Excellent. So, once again, thank you for tuning into the Lens Living Diverse. If you enjoyed today's podcast, as well as many podcasts that we did in the past, you could like and subscribe to your favorite platforms. Once again, just hit the like or subscribe, and we have so many platforms that we're available on. Also, if you like to know more about advocacy with the CNIB, you could visit www.cnib.ca and then just click on the advocacy portion and then go to We Are CNIB for the diversity and inclusion. And lastly, if you have any input or interested in taking part of the Lens Living Diverse, you could email us at advocacy@cnib.ca. Once again, advocacy@cnib.ca. So like I said, once again, thank you for tuning into the Lens Living Diverse. I was your host, Ben, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Peace.
Bye.